We're in Ezra chapter 6. It's Ezra 6, starting in verse 19. We're on page 393 in your black pew Bibles. Ezra chapter 6, page 393. And today we're coming to the triumphant climax of the whole first half of the book of Ezra. Remember, we're only halfway through the whole book. We haven't actually met Ezra yet, but he'll show up next after Easter, I promise. And we're actually at one of the high points of the whole Old Testament as well. The people of God have completed the Second Temple. They're back in Jerusalem after 70 years of exile. And now they've come to celebrate the Passover meal. And it's clear through all of this that they have experienced real deliverance. Real deliverance. And when I say that, they've experienced real deliverance, I mean something different from they cooked up a victory for themselves. We've been talking about how one of the major themes of the book of Ezra is revival. Remember, God is sovereign over his enemies and faithful to his own, so therefore revival is only a moment away. Revival is not something where we just take all of the list of things, of ingredients, and we put them together and we can cook it up for ourselves. It just doesn't work that way. Revival depends upon divine deliverance. And by definition, deliverance can't be self-made. Deliverance cannot be earned. It is always a gift of grace. And that is at the very core, the very heart of the Christian gospel. So looking at our passage, I see three signs that this is what they're experiencing is real deliverance and not a manufactured revival. Three signs. The first is that sign this is real deliverance is that it comes from the outside. It comes from the outside. Remember that even after God's people returned from exile, right, in 539 BC through the decree of Cyrus, they still faced 20 years of resistance as they tried to rebuild this temple. All of the locals were having major problems. They were threatened by this. They used abuse. They tried to join them and manipulate them. Then they used corruption. And then eventually they appealed to the king. And God's people are delivered from this struggle, but the deliverance comes in a strange way. And Ezra has a strange way of describing it in this passage. Look at the second half of verse 22. This is kind of weird. It says, "The Lord had turned the heart of the king of Assyria to them, so that he aided them in the work of the house of God, the God of Israel." Do you see that? God turned the heart of the king of Assyria. There is no king of Assyria. There is no Assyria at this point. The Assyrian Empire has been gone for almost 200 years by the time this happens. The Babylonians conquered the Assyrian Empire in 609 BC. And then the Persians came along in 539 BC and conquered the Babylonians. So the king of Assyria is 2 empires ago, right? Now we have Darius, or Darius if you're English. Or apparently Diana Yanks pointed out I think the modern Persians call it Dariush. So I'm just going to go with Darius because it sounds more sophisticated. Darius, the Persian king, he's the Persian king. He issued the decree. So what's going on? Is this a scribal error? Is this just a testament to biblical unreliability? Whoops. Got a name wrong. No big deal. Did Ezra get his empires wrong by 200 years? No. Technically, Darius is the king of everything that was Assyria, right? He is the king of Assyria. In a sense. What's going on? Ezra is making a point. The people of God have been delivered from their enemies, the people of the land, because God turned the heart of the king, and not just any king. This is the king who's inheriting the throne of their ancient enemy. For hundreds of years, all the way back in the 700s, God's people were terrified that the king of Assyria was going to conquer them. It was the king of Assyria who took off the northern kingdom in 722 BC and shipped them off to wherever the pipe wrench went, right? If this is your first Sunday, just disregard that comment. You're not going to get it. It's okay. Still glad you're here. Hopefully you'll stay. It was the king of Assyria that's the ancient enemy. But God turns the heart of the ancient enemy to deliver his people now. Who's the hero of this story? It's not Zerubbabel, the guy who led them out of Babylon. It's not Jeshua, the high priest. It's not even Ezra, who, again, we haven't even met yet. It's God. The hero of the story is God. God is the one who delivers. And that's really the whole point of the book. The book of Ezra, throughout evangelical churches, is often preached as a kind of leadership handbook. How can we have good techniques for leadership? There's lots of good leadership lessons, but that's not what the book of Ezra is about. It's about divine deliverance, a God who is sovereign over his enemies and is faithful to his own, to the people who he claimed for himself. Now, this is an unsatisfying message to a lot of us. If, like me, you tend to be a moralist at heart who thinks they can earn their salvation on some deep level, it's going to be unsatisfying to you because it tells you that you are not in control of your life. And that ultimately what you do in life is not as important as what some other being does in your life. And that's hard to accept. It's very un-American. But that's the key message of the Bible. You're not in control. You're not your own deliverer. You are not self-made. No one is. No one can save themselves. Deliverance comes from outside. It comes from God. Second reason I think this is real deliverance is that you see real heart change. Our text has been in Aramaic, which was the language of Babylon, ever since chapter 4, verse 8. We don't see it in our English translations, right? But most of the Old Testament is written in Hebrew. And then in chapter 4, verse 8, it transitions to Aramaic for a variety of reasons. But now, suddenly, in chapter 6, verse 19, it's back to Hebrew. It's back to the home tongue. It's back to the God-given tongue, the God-given language with this account of Passover. Is this a coincidence? I don't think anything in Ezra is really a coincidence. In Hebrew, we read in verse 19 that the returned exiles celebrated the Passover. Literally, it's B'nai Hagolah, the sons of the exile. That's what the Hebrew says, the sons of the exile. And I think that's a more potent way of putting it. You're not just a returned exile, you're the son of the exile. Remember, in these ancient cultures, everything depends on whose son you are. Right? My own name, Benjamin, means Ben Yamin, son of my right hand, right? It's all about who's your daddy, whose son are you? What stock do you come from? From where were you birthed? From where were you delivered? So their whole identity is we are delivered from the exile, and that's who we are now. They're called children of it. And it's clear that their hearts have been changed. Something internal has changed because for once in the life of the people of God, they're obedient. If you notice, they keep the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. And God commands in Exodus 12 that you should keep the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. They consecrate and the priests and Levites purified themselves, just like God commanded throughout the book of Exodus. They slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the returned exiles, their fellow priests, and for themselves, just like God commands in Exodus 12. They kept the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. By the way, this is a very serious ordeal. Modern-day Jewish people will have 2 sets of dishes, one that they keep completely sealed away so that there's no possibility that there's residual yeast on the dishes for those 7 days, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They keep it just like God commanded. If you read through Exodus chapter 12, you can do this on your own time later, you will notice that the sons of the exile have taken pains not only to read the law, but to obey it. Their obedience is not just some sort of general emotionalized feeling. It is a specific and attentive thing. And this has not been the norm throughout their history. Even back in the desert, they were a stiff-necked people. When Moses gets the law, he's up on the mountain, meeting with God. God gives him the stones, tablets of the law, and he's coming down. And guess what Moses sees? In his absence, all the people have taken their jewelry off, thrown it into the fire, and made a metal calf to worship. They're idolaters from the very beginning. They're always running after things that are not God. And they do this over and over and over and over again for hundreds, more than 1,000 years, until, Tim Keller points this out, until they come back as the sons of the exile. And after that, they never go back. They never go back. Oftentimes, we think that we can change our heart just through our moral efforts, through our spiritual disciplines. I'm not knocking spiritual disciplines. They do provide opportunities that God uses to change our hearts day after day, week after week. But notice the language, what I said there, that God uses to change our hearts. You can't just do it any more than a sick patient can heal themselves. It's God that does it. Deliverance comes from the outside, but it works on the inside. Third reason, and this is the really amazing one, contagious joy. Contagious joy. Verse 22, they kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with rote obedience and dour faces. No, with joy. It's a party. The word connotes mirth, gladness, or pleasure. There is no possible lexical gloss or translation in this Old Testament word joy that suggests someone who is inherently dour but chooses to force a smile on it anyways. It wells up from the inside. And this joy is so vital that the neighbors want in on it. Verse 21, the Passover was eaten by the people of Israel who had returned from the exile, and also by everyone who had joined them, who had separated himself from the uncleanness of the peoples of the land to worship the Lord, the God of Israel. Who's this talking about? This is the Samaritans. This is the people of the land, people who are totally outside of the people of God, who join in on the Passover celebration. And I just want to clarify, first off, everyone is encouraged and invited to please invite your friends and neighbors to Easter. It's a great time for people to come back to church. This is not that. Okay, it is not that hard to come to church if you haven't been to church in a long time. It's a little bit intimidating, right? You're worried if people are going to judge you. But if a visitor comes through the doors, we don't ask anything of them. You're welcome to just be here, really, for as long as you want. That's not the case with the Passover, okay? Let me put it this way. Exodus 12 specifies that every male who eats the Passover must be circumcised. Okay, so if you are not one of these non-Jewish neighbors, and it says that they separated themselves from the uncleanness of the peoples of the land to worship the Lord, that was not a casual arrangement. I won't go into more detail than that, but let's just say it was not the most easy thing ever. These people became fully converted. They fully entered the people of God in order to come and eat this Passover meal with them. So great, so compelling was the joy that they saw among this people that no price was too high. When we find something that's really compelling, we will go after it, no matter the price. Jenna and I have a friend who, her boyfriend in college was deeply in love, and they're married now. But he was thoroughly smitten and thoroughly po. He couldn't afford the OR at the end, right? He's just po. He had nothing. And this guy wanted to marry this girl so bad. He got extra jobs to try to save up to buy an engagement ring. That wasn't cutting it. So he went and month after month, as often as he could, sold his plasma to be able to buy an engagement ring. He literally bought it with his own blood. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like a man who found a treasure in a field and sold everything he had to buy that field. I think the church needs to be welcoming to people who are searching and seeking. But I think we make a mistake if we try to make it as easy and comfortable as we can. Jesus asks everything of us. It's incredible. Grace is free and incredibly costly. And if we try to say like, oh, it's not really that big of a deal, you don't have to change, you don't have to do anything, aren't we sort of short-selling what the reality is? We're not after, no one becomes a Christian because it's easy. We become a Christian because it's true, and because it's compelling, and because it's capable of delivering and changing your life. That's why we come to follow Christ. Real deliverance, real heart change, and real joy is incredibly attractive. And I know many of you have tasted little snippets in this life of what that deliverance is like. Some of you have experienced dramatic interruptions in your lives that God used to save you. And it proved to be the fulcrum or the turning point of your entire life's history. I know many of you, you'll talk about a certain event or a certain moment, and everything is either before this or after this. Everything changed. The lights turned on. Some of you have been through times when you were accused or maligned, and then the truth finally came out and you were vindicated. And the world re-brightened again. Some of you have suffered years of infertility and miscarriages as young parents. And then when you saw the birth of your first child. There was nothing like it after that. It's not that all that grief goes away, but you see God's faithfulness at the end of that. Some of you have been delivered out of toxic or abusive situations, relationships, where a person was really tormenting you and just had the grip on you. And then, it's not anything that you did, but the grip released, and you were free. Some of you got your health back after prolonged physical suffering. Some of you experienced reconciliation in relationships that you didn't think was possible. And there was a relationship that you had just signed off as dead and gone. And then suddenly it was back, and you had to taste the sweetness of that again. Deliverance just opens the world up to you. It really makes you want to skip, because you realize that you didn't produce it yourself when you really experience it. It's like Psalm 126 says, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, then we were like those who dream. But I also know that many of us, or perhaps most of us, are desperate for this kind of thing on some level. A lot of times we're both at the same time, right? We've experienced it and we're desperate for it. We really want deliverance and heart change and joy. Our bodies are hurting and breaking, and it just seems to be getting worse. Our tears have not yet been wiped away. The trauma has not been healed. Cancer is still a thing, I hate to report to you. Guilt and shame and fear are all still things. And they have grips on us. And you can't just say, I'm not going to be afraid anymore. I'm not going to be ashamed anymore. I'm not going to feel guilty anymore. And then we read the news and we're astonished at wickedness and atrocity happening in the world around us. And then you look into your own home and you're like, well, it's not actually that much better. Some of you are afraid to call yourselves Christians because you can see the inside of your own soul, and you see darkness and hypocrisy in your own heart. And you're like, it's just not possible that God could actually want me. It's really easy to grow cynical when you're waiting for deliverance. It's easy to. And to be honest, the account of Ezra 6, it's such a high point, it's such a kind of it seems like a happy ending, that it exposes my own unbelief. It comes down to this. Do I really believe that God can bring real deliverance and heart change and joy into my own story? Do I really think that's possible? To be frank, for me personally, Ben, the answer probably the majority of the time is no. But the strength of your faith is not the good news. The good news is Christ. The good news is the one who holds you. The good news is the object of your faith. Jesus says, if you have grain the size of a mustard seed, then you can move a mountain. Well, mine's a lot smaller than a mustard seed. A lot of times I don't actually really believe. But I do know that God has planted something deep within this heart that's starting to grow up and bud. And he's doing something in there. And so there is faith. Not from me, but from him. So I want to finish by saying something really quick about the Passover and something about Palm Sunday, because these two things are really key for us in understanding how Ezra 6 applies to our life. First, the Passover. It's not a coincidence that this happens over the Passover. They're celebrating the Passover. What is the Passover? It's a yearly reminder of how God delivered his people once, and he'll do it again. He says, consecrate yourselves, because he set them apart. Eat unleavened bread. Don't be too attached. You need to be ready to go. There's no time for the bread to rise. There's no time to wait on the yeast. I'm going to deliver you like that when you least expect it. Slaughter the Passover lamb. Remember that I delivered you through death by sacrifice, and it was costly. Eat unleavened bread for 7 days. That's the number of completeness. Complete deliverance. I don't halfway save. I'm a God of full deliverance, of full salvation. The point is that I delivered you once, I will deliver you again. As he says to Moses in the beginning of Exodus, Moses is like, who should I say sent me? Tell them, I am who I am. In other words, I am the one who will be with you. That's what God's name is. I am your deliverer. That's Passover. And now Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday, the original one, occurred on the week before Passover. This too is not a coincidence. Jesus chose the timing of when he entered into Jerusalem. Luke 9:51 says that when the time came for him to be taken up, he set his face toward Jerusalem. In other words, he decided the terms upon which he went to the cross. And when did he decide to go? Because the context really helps us to see, right? He could have chosen Hanukkah, right? He's a Messiah. That's the last time that people rose up against the authorities was Hanukkah, the Maccabees, right? That would have worked. That would have signaled something. He could have chosen the Day of Atonement, because Christianity is all about atonement, isn't it? That's what the cross is. But he didn't choose either of those things. Didn't choose either of those times. He chose the Passover. He chose to come and die at the Passover. Why? Because Jesus wanted, maybe I should say Jesus wants us to understand his death as the final exodus, the final deliverance. He disarmed, Paul says in Colossians, he disarmed the demonic strongholds. The author of the Hebrews says he broke the power of the devil. Paul says in 1 Corinthians that he triumphed over the final enemy, death. And so we're kind of like, we do live in this in-between place where we're waiting to taste the full bit of deliverance. It's a little bit like, when was World War II over in Europe? VE Day, right? It was over then. It was really over then. Then people partied in the streets. But when was it like, we know it's over? Well, it was over on D-Day +1. the moment those beaches were taken in Normandy. There was a ways for the war to go. Berlin was still fighting, but the war was over. The battle was won. The decisive victory had been attained. And so I want to just declare to you as we go into Holy Week, whatever the trauma or physical pain or unresolved tension is that is in your life that seems irredeemable. Colossians 1:13, He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. In the name of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.